Robert Plank Show, episode 386, Strengthen the Disciplined Muscle. From overworked, overscheduled, and overwhelmed to focused, confident, and accomplished with Rita Emmett. Hey everyone, we're talking right now with Rita Emmett, and Rita is convinced that when you break the procrastination habit, you'll not only get more done and start doing some of the things you've been hoping to do, but you'll also feel more energized. And you know what? Ending your procrastination habit is one of the very best gifts you can give yourself. So we have a professional speaker and author on the line, and her first book was called The Procrastinator's Handbook, and it sold 100,000 copies in its first year. So if you want to conquer, defeat, delete procrastination, this is the show to listen to. So we're going to talk to Rita right now. So Rita, how are things?
Things are great, Robert. And I want to tell you that I was the world's greatest procrastinator, and then I converted, and now I'm a recovering procrastinator. So today we're not only going to talk strategies and tips, but I give hope to people. I think sometimes people feel like, oh, I was born a procrastinator. I'll always be this way. It's in my DNA. And it's not. And so it's simply a habit. And today we're going to talk about how to break that habit.
Super cool. I'm excited, and I definitely I know that it's a constant struggle, right? Every day to kind of be our best self, and I've definitely at times kind of had that defeatist attitude, and I've said I was a procrastinator. There's nothing I can do, and I've also dealt with tons of people also who kind of had that sort of they've already given up attitude, and so I'm excited to sort of get over that hump. So you said that you yourself were the world's biggest procrastinator. So can you give us like an idea of like how bad things really were back then?
It took me 18 years to get a 4-year college degree.
Oh,
That's
geez.
one example. The other example is I had so much clutter in my house. I was close to being a hoarder. There were paths through the dining room, and we never could use the dining room table because of the clutter accumulated on it. And I
So
just
what
go
kind
ahead.
of made things that bad? I mean, was it like just like the way things were, or did was it like a slippery slope and you let things slide? Like, how did things get to that sort of really terrible point where there was just all the clutter and you're almost a hoarder?
It was just a whole lifetime of it. I used to claim in high school that I studied and studied for the test, and I still flunked it. I was terrible in high school. I got A's, by the way, for my master's degree. There, guess where I converted? I by the 18 years to get a 4-year degree, 2.5 years to get a master's degree. The conversion happened right there. But in high school, I would swear that I studied so hard and I don't know why I flunked. And really, Robert, I never opened a book, or many times I opened it and just glanced at it. And I thought so much about how I needed to study. I believed I studied. I just put off everything as a kid, as a young adult. Just, I didn't have dreams as a kid when teenagers talked about what they wanted to do. I knew I'd never get around to doing anything, so I didn't have dreams and I didn't have goals because I knew I'd never set them. And I didn't become a Girl Scout leader because I felt like I'd screw everything up because I was a screw up. And I'm sorry about that because Girl Scouts is one of my passions, and I didn't. But I really feel that if at that time, if I became a leader, I would have really messed things up. So I passed up opportunities. I didn't try new things. I didn't have goals or dreams. I never took a risk. I just kind of muddled along and thought this is how life is. Feeling like a loser, feeling stupid, and feeling like there was zero control in my life. I reacted to what happened to me. I didn't take initiative. I really am a different person now, I'm telling you.
Well, it's good that you changed your ways and you figured out, what was wrong, and hopefully we'll kind of get some insights about that. So it sounds like so no goals, no dreams, no action, and but kind of like that weird sort of feeling like you take an action, but then when you look back at the actual like facts, you didn't really crack a book, missed opportunities, missed trying new things, reacting to all those things. And it sounds like we've all kind of been there at one time or another, sort of drifting through life, where maybe we go through the path of least resistance, which is easy now, but then once that kind of gets set as a pattern, it seems like sort of a really kind of dull, unsatisfied life in the long term. So, I mean, when did you kind of start to realize things had to make a change? Like you said, you made that switch over later on, later on in school. But like, like, what was the first kind of like awakening moment for you?
I fell into a weird part time job. It's a long story how I fell into it, where I was the community outreach for a mental health agency, and they would have me do this was back in the early 80s. They would have me do 8 week classes. They would have a waiting list, and they'd say to me, we have people with communications issues. So I'd read books, take seminars, and put together a communications class for 8 weeks long. And one of the issues was time management. And part of time management is obviously positive goal setting and prioritizing, but also procrastination. And there were no good books on it out there. So I'd send people home and say, try this. And they'd come back and sometimes they'd say, that did not work. Or they'd say, that worked. And after several sessions of 8 weeks and then another program, another one, we had stuff that worked. And I was starting to practice it too. And that's why I wrote the book, because people were saying there's no books out there. There were 11 books, every one by a psychologist for a psychologist. Why, exploring why do you procrastinate? I was working at a mental health place. I had the ability to approach it psychologically, but I didn't. I approached it behaviorally. In the book, it's like, here's the problem. Let's talk about a solution. What's the problem? Identify the problem. Let's work on a solution. And when I wrote the book, I asked the publisher, could we make it a paperback? Because a lot of people can't afford $30. And I really want to get, for a regular book, hardcover, and I really want to get the message out there. And most people could afford 12 or 15 bucks. And the publisher said, we can do that, but you're going to lose a lot in royalties. And I said, how many books am I going to sell a year? Maybe 50. And then it sold 100,000. Much to my surprise and the publisher's surprise. But I don't think that book sold so, and it's in 32 countries and it's doing really well. I don't think it's because I'm a great writer. I think it's because it was the right book at the right time. Everybody was looking for a book for the normal everyday person, not a psychologist.
Right, and I can definitely relate to that. Like not wanting to be overloaded with all the terminology and all this sort of hoity-toity scientific stuff. I just want to know the actions to take there. And so
Yes.
I'm really curious. So you mentioned in there that that you were doing the community outreach sort of stuff and like giving people time management advice. And you said that people said that some of the advice just absolutely didn't work and some of it did. So I'm really curious. First off, like what sort of like advice was out there that just doesn't work at all? I'm really curious about that.
Put up post-its that say just do it. It did not just do it, Robert. It seemed simple and obvious to me. No, that doesn't help at all. I had them put these post-its up all over their house saying just do it, and every person said that had zero impact on me. Okay, so that was one that didn't work. um, another one was, I said, write down what you want to accomplish. And I didn't talk to them about breaking into chunks. Eventually, in fact, I have a 5 step strategy for breaking the procrastination habit. And the very first step is select one thing you've been putting off. And if it's a large project, break it down in little chunks. But I was having them tackle, you want to write a book, start writing a book. They're crazy. I didn't know what I was doing. I was a procrastinator at the time. So it was only after we'd say, try this, and then they'd come back and say, this worked, but that was an obstacle. Okay, then try this, and then the next step. And we came up with 5 steps that seemed to work for everyone. For most people, they work.
Super cool, and I mean that makes sense that maybe there was some advice out of a book that was sort of on the right track but not quite refined, right? Like having the post-its that say just do it, but not really having the details, or having a
Exactly.
post-it that has like a huge goal, and it's like, well, I can't write a whole book, so I just look at that goal and I'm just like, I can't even start on it, I can't even chip away on it. So then like I keep seeing this reminder, and then the more I see it, the less I pay attention to it because the less real that it is, because now I've seen that dang post it for 10 days, 100 days, 200 days, and I keep on seeing it and haven't even made any progress. So I don't really relate taking action to seeing this posted. So I mean that makes perfect sense. And so you mentioned, so there's a lot of sort of cheesy stuff that doesn't work, but then by kind of doing this trial and error, you refine down these 5 steps to conquering procrastination. So I'm really curious. Can you reveal these steps of these 5 steps to us today?
Absolutely. I'm trying to get the message out to the whole world because it seems to work even for kids, it works. But one thing I want to mention is that thing about being overwhelmed by this big thing. That is a big deal for entrepreneurs. Oh Lord, I've got to figure out a marketing plan. That's just overwhelming. Yes, so let's get going. Here's what I call it: take the sting out of feeling overwhelmed, and the first letter of each of the 5 steps spells S-T-I-N-G, sting. And the S is what we just talked about. Select one task you've been putting off. If it's a big project, break it into chunks and select one chunk. And the second thing is time yourself. Give the T of sting, give yourself 1 full hour. And I talk about so many times procrastinators say, I don't have a free afternoon free of interruptions to do this, or I don't have a whole Saturday free to do this. And so I advocate just do 1 hour. 1 hour might not get that whole marketing plan done, but 1 hour might help you outline it or call Joe and ask for help or something. Just 1 hour. And I recommend people take an ordinary kitchen timer and time yourself for that hour. A lot of people say I don't need a timer. That's fine, you don't. But I got to tell you, the tick, tick, tick of the timer creates a bit of an urgency to it. And so we got S, select one task, T, time yourself. The I of sting. This really is a big deal for the at-home entrepreneur. There's two rules coming up, I and N. I is ignore everything else you have to do. I think at-home entrepreneurs especially are surrounded by so many um, distractions and things to do. They're, they decide today I'm really going to work at promoting such and such. But first, I think I'll go get a cup of coffee. And then they get a cup of coffee and they see, oh, well, this belongs up on my desk. So they take it over to their desk. Oh, I ought to pay this bill. Okay, so they pay the bill. Oh, for this thing, I need to make a phone call. So they make a phone call. At the end of the day, they got 15 things started, none of them finished. And a lot of times they'll say, well, I was multitasking. But it's not multitasking if nothing is done. So it's almost like we need to, when you go to the gym, you're not, and you first start on a program, you're not coordinated, your muscles hurt, you don't think you can do it. It's almost like we're starting to do that with the discipline muscle because it is very hard to ignore all the things coming in, the dinging and the uh, texting and all the little notifications coming in. But if somebody was in an important meeting, they would not be using their phone. And so people are used to leaving a message and thinking you will return it eventually. So we need to start ignoring everything else and not stopping to return a text or stopping to do something. And I said there's 2 rules to the sting thing. I is ignore everything else you have to do, but N is no breaks allowed. Robert, am I talking too fast? Do you want to jump in here with comments or thoughts?
No, I mean, you're on a roll. This is making perfect sense. So in Sting so far, select one task you've been putting off, time yourself for 1 full hour, ignore everything else, and now we're on no breaks allowed. So I'm excited. I'm writing down lots of notes. This is exciting.
Okay. Oh, you're good. You're good. Okay. No breaks allowed. So that means a lot of times we'll say, when people first start, they say, okay, I'm setting the timer for 1 hour. Let's get going. You know what? I need to change the temperature in the office. Okay, now it's better. I need to go get a cup of coffee. And I have to tell you, I was so good at taking breaks that I could take a 2 hour job and have it last 8 months. Did we just lose the sound?
Nope, you're still here.
Okay, and have it last 8 months. So I was very good at breaks. That one was hard for me. And so to this day, if I'm in the middle of something and I'm dying for a cup of coffee, I do not let myself get it till the hour's up. So you just repeat it. S, select one task. T, time yourself for an hour. I, ignore everything else, and no breaks. G is give yourself a reward when the task is done. It sounds simple, but for many people, it's the hardest one. Many people say, "Oh, other people need a reward. I don't need one." Yeah, you really do. It's a part of the strategy, and it's very common for people that will ask me, "How can I get myself to like jobs that I hate to do, or tasks that I hate to do?" I don't know. I don't know if you'll ever like it. But if you have a reward at the end of that task and you'll do anything to get to it, that's the secret. There is great power in rewards. A lot of people's rewards are something they could have anyway, but they don't let themselves. Again, we're back to developing that discipline muscle. At first it's hard, then it gets easy. So back to my love of coffee. I let myself have 1 cup in the morning. And then I come in and I put in 1 hour on something very focused. I'm a night person, not a morning person. I walk in and I sort of need directions. So at night, I write down 6 things on a post it that I really want to tackle the next day. And I'll put in an hour. Maybe in that hour, I could do 3 things. Or maybe in that hour, I can only do a portion of one thing. But I power through 1 hour, no interruptions, no breaks. Then at the end, I give myself all the coffee I want. Could I have the coffee anyway? Yes. But I'm disciplining myself. A friend of mine recently told me well, I've always known his routine was he'd come home, grab a beer, put his feet up, turn on TV. But recently he got workout equipment, and he said, I'm going to work out 20 minutes every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And I said, what's your reward going to be to make sure you do it? And he said, I'm going to pat myself on the back. No, that's not going to do it. Sometimes people say the reward is getting the job done itself. Well, if that was true, why did you put it off? That's not going to do it. And I told him that's never going to get you going. So 2 weeks later, he called and said, for 2 weeks, every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, I have worked out for 20 minutes. Ha! And I said, what was the secret? And he said, my reward was, my routine of coming in, grabbing a beer, putting up my feet and watching TV. I would not let myself touch a beer or put up my feet or turn on that TV until I put in the 20 minutes. And so that was his reward. So I'm saying that a lot of times a reward is something you could have anyway, but you discipline yourself not to. There is another source of great rewards, and that is when I first started talking about procrastination 20 years ago, people put off what they hated to do. Now people still put off what they hate to do, but so many people are so busy, they put off what they love to do. They say, oh, I love to read novels, mysteries, whatever, but I have so much professional stuff to read. I haven't read one in years. Well, let that be a reward that you could read for a half hour or so, guilt-free, because you just put in an hour on something that's important to you. Or people would say, oh, I love getting together with friends. Or one woman said she talked to her sister every day, and now they only talk once a month. A lot of people don't have time with friends. So let the reward be little rewards for little things, big rewards for big things. So maybe you just did an hour on something. And so you call a friend and say, let's take a coffee break. I'm just real proud of myself. I put an hour in getting rid of paper clutter. But maybe you were decluttering the office and you got the whole office decluttered. Big reward. Maybe go out to dinner with friends or with your family or something. Does that make sense? I feel like I'm trying to sell people on that reward part. because that is the hardest thing. And a lot of people actually find it hard to think of a reward because all they've been thinking about is their business, their profession, their career, and they haven't thought about giving themselves. Tell me, Robert, what would you use as a reward for putting in an hour on something you don't like to do or you've been putting off?
What I could use as a reward is floating in the pool in the backyard.
Guilt free.
Yeah.
You might go into the pool and feel all guilty, but now it could be guilt free. And that's the big thing. People start to get into that rhythm of work and reward, and the rewards start to become more meaningful, and they'll start to say, oh, I just thought of a great reward. And all of a sudden, they're enjoying life more for two reasons. One is they're getting stuff done they've been putting off, so they feel like they're gaining control of their work and their life. And the other reason is they're starting to incorporate things they really love to do. I have a friend who loves to go to movies, funny movies. He can watch all the movies he wants at home on a DVD, but he likes comedies in a theater where he could laugh with everybody else. He had not been to a movie theater in 3 years. Once he started going back, he said he just is thrilled. He forgot how much he enjoyed it. So there's all kinds of things we put off, concerts and going to the zoo and stuff like that, and just we can start bringing those loved things back into our life. Sometimes when I'm given a seminar, I'll ask, if you're stuck, think of something you loved to do as a kid. And I got an email from a woman, and she said, I'm the lady who raised her hand and said, as a kid, I loved to do coloring books. Can I call you and tell you what has happened? And I thought, oh, great, sure. I said, sure. And I'm thinking, wow, maybe she took an oil painting class or a watercolor. Maybe she's become an artist. She called and told me she had filled in 8 coloring books, different strokes for different folks. That's what she likes to do. So, did comments, questions, anything that didn't make sense in there?
I mean, no, it all made sense. So select one task you've been putting off, time yourself, ignore everything else, no breaks allowed, and give yourself a reward. And I mean, a lot of things come to mind there. I mean, like just that, I think that in the past, a lot of us, and I mean me as well, like I've definitely kind of put off the things that were important to kind of go and have fun, and but then never really quite enjoyed it. Like I was never really quite present. I always felt a little guilty or a little sort of distracted about, I'm playing around now, but I've got this thing in the back of my mind that I have to do later today. And by sort of changing things up by giving yourself the reward later, it's like you get the guilt out of it. It's like, well, I'm rewarding myself now because I took some action. So now I know that, like, I did those things that I needed to do, and now I've set up this kind of new pattern of also going back to those sort of creative outlets or those things that brought enjoyment that maybe like we had forgotten about years and years ago, and just kind of let ourselves backslide into this sort of this bad rhythm, and now we're kind of changing things up and having the good rhythm. So a lot of things kind of came to mind when you were explaining that system, like just things like, like when I used to, I used to go to the gym, and now I just do walking and running, but I used to go to the gym with friends, and it was always a matter of I'd put it off, or I'd procrastinate, or the group of guys that would go to the gym kind of became less and less in numbers, and every time I felt like I didn't want to go, or I don't have time, I told myself, well, if I'm just focusing on just showing up to the gym, and if I just show up, then the rest will take care of itself. Or like that whole piece of advice of, if you want to start doing push-ups, just do one push-up today. Don't think about doing 100 or 200. Just do the one today, and that's one more than you would have done. And like, it's more important to kind of set that habit of going the extra mile, and kind of ramping up, as opposed to overloading yourself and then having that kind of shame cycle. Like, it makes me think of when I do like walks or runs or things like that. Sometimes I'll have like a certain like path already decided on, or a certain distance, and sometimes I'll go a little further than I had before, or I'll run a little bit longer than I walk, or things like that. And it's just like kind of getting into that new routine, getting into that new habit. And so, and you mentioned a lot of those things, and it also kind of made me think of different like coaching clients or people that like I've helped with one on one. And it's like some people either were like really resistant or really stubborn, or I'm not sure if they're ready to make a change. Like if I told someone, you need to make a website, here's my advice, make a website like this, and they came back to me and said, oh, well, I'll make 50 websites. And I'm like, well, how about you just start with the one? And they couldn't overcome their thinking. Or I think of someone else that I've dealt with where they'd come to me with a problem. I give them an answer, and they say, "Oh well, I can't. I'm not going to do that because I've heard of that." So, do you have any advice as far as like changing your thinking or knowing when things aren't working, you've reached the end of your rope? Is there a secret to kind of knowing when you've had enough, or maybe speed up that process to actually get to make a change?
Well, there's a whole other aspect to this. I just want to comment on two things you said. One of the things you said is very often you used to be not very present when you get together with friends. And several people have told me, and I too have experienced, that as my procrastination diminished, I became more into the now, more into present, more into just really enjoying the moment. And I can't explain that part of the phenomenon, but that does happen a lot. And the other thing is, I wanted to point out that it's give yourself a reward, not get a reward. So a trip to Hawaii would be great, wonderful for decluttering a room, but that's not going to happen. What can you give yourself? Okay, so you're asking about the reluctance. Let me tell you this STING strategy works for about 85% of everything we've been putting off. When it doesn't work, well, first of all, you brought up a lot of good stuff. One of the things you brought up was sometimes people don't want to change. And if they don't want to change, there's nothing we can do. And if they're just opposed to change, they're not going to do it, we need to back off. But when they truly want to change and they've tried STING and it still didn't work, there's another aspect to procrastination, and that is fears that hold us back. And Robert, maybe we need another. I just blanked out. We're doing a podcast?
Yeah.
Maybe we need another podcast on that, because the fears that hold people back, especially entrepreneurs, fear of making a mistake, fear of being less perfect, fear of failure. Everybody understands fear of failure. What about fear of success? Here's the secret. Well, I guess it's not a secret. I think everybody knows this. As long as that fear is in our subconscious and we just can't get ourselves to do something, it has the power to immobilize us, to paralyze us. But once we identify that fear, it loses its power. I've heard people say, you know what? I was really afraid of rejection. And when I realized I was afraid of rejection, I thought, I'm not going to let fear of rejection rule my life. So once you identify it, you feel like, oh, is that what's holding me back? Well, anytime I do a seminar on procrastination, I talk about perfectionism and how we try to be perfect and how that causes a lot of procrastination. So today we have a strategy, but you're bringing up, what are some of the causes? Fear, perfectionism, and that might be a whole nother podcast. Unless you want to go into it now, we can. It's up to you, love.
I mean, I think let's keep people in suspense. Let's sort of wrap things up here, and then in a later show, if we want to unwrap that fear, the perfectionism, I think we've given people a lot to think about, a lot to sort of look inward. I think that yeah, we can definitely leave that for another podcast. But what I'm hearing from you as far as like people getting the sort of the problem solved today, making problems, or getting some progress, there today. What I'm hearing from you is that if people have maybe this fear that's holding them back, and maybe they don't realize that it's fear, or maybe they can't really put their finger on what exactly. It sounds like what you're saying is that we should look to break down the problem. If we have that fear or that doubt, maybe drill down into like what kind of fear that it is. And then something that I've heard from sort of between the lines in our conversation here is it sounds like there's a lot of power in like writing down exactly what needs to be done or writing down what's holding us back. And I think that it makes sort of that kind of thinking makes me think of there's been many times when I just wasn't sure why I wasn't enthusiastic about something. I wasn't sure why I wasn't taking action on something, and just by kind of bringing that sub problem to the light, just by getting it on paper, seems to take a lot of the steam out of it. Just something as simple as that.
I agree. I agree. Again, though, I suggest trying the Sting thing. Honestly, Sting works. That's STING works for 85% of what we want to accomplish. It's just the weird things. Usually it's the bigger things. You know, writing the book. Why haven't you started writing a book? I don't know. Okay, let's talk about fears then. Or another person, why haven't you started writing the book? Well, I just put an hour in on it and I just started an outline. I'm on my way. So Sting works for most things, but fears can immobilize us. You're absolutely right. We could have a procrastination, the sequel, or the return of procrastination in another podcast. Yes.
Yeah, procrastination strikes back. There we go. So
Strikes back, the return of it. Yeah.
I love it. So cool. So for now, everyone should just focus on these Sting steps. I know that for me, like when I was a young punk, when I was a teenager, a high schooler, I always thought that the simple things were things to be ignored. I should just skip over that and focus on the advanced stuff. But as I kind of got older, I realized, oh yeah, these simple things that we keep hearing over and over again. Maybe there's a reason why the simple things are still around, and the more advanced, crazy stuff comes and goes. So everyone should commit to this. Do the Sting sort of method. S, select one task you've been putting off, and then T, time yourself for 1 full hour. Use a kitchen timer. That way you get the kind of ticking down of the minutes and the seconds. I, ignore everything else. Don't fall into that trap of, I've got to clean out my desk before this. I got to pay some bills. I got to go vacuum. Next thing you know, you spend a whole day starting 50 things and never finishing anything. So ignore everything else till the job is done. And no breaks allowed. Same sort of thinking, because if you tell yourself I'm going to spend an hour on this, next thing you know, you did 45 minutes worth of other stuff. You didn't actually commit to it. And then G, what sounds like the most important is give yourself a reward when the task is done, whether that's a cup of coffee or going for a drive or something like that. Give yourself a reward. That way you can get that pattern going of taking some action and getting something out of it. STING. And so Rita, as far as this sort of Sting thing, I mean, do you recommend that, like, someone tries to do this, like, or someone not tries, but someone does this every day or every time that they're doing a task, or only when they feel stuck? Like, what's the sort of routine as far as applying this? Like, how often should we do this?
Well, after you start working with it, it becomes habit to break things down into small chunks, and it just all becomes a habit. When I first started it, I would put it aside until I couldn't get myself to get started on something. If I couldn't get myself to get started, I'd pull out Sting again and okay, select one part of it, and go through it. And my biggest obstacle, everybody has different obstacles, was that I'd forget the part about ignore everything else. So I'd be putting an hour in on something, but I'd be starting, but I think I have attention deficit disorder. And you know what? People who are diagnosed with ADD or ADHD tell me that Sting is the only thing that has ever helped them. And it does, because if you don't have a strong attention span, you think to yourself, oh, I don't want to work on that all evening or all afternoon. But you think, oh, I could put in an hour. That's okay. I'll do an hour. So if anybody's interested, they could go to my website, which is ritaemmett.com, Rita, and the last name is two M's, two T's, Emmett. And if you scroll down towards the bottom of the homepage, you'll see it says looking for Sting, and it's not the singer. You click on it, and up will come a little picture of a bumblebee with a squished stinger, and the all the letters printed out, the 5 steps printed out, and people can print it off. It's free, and post it someplace to remind them.
Super awesome. So everyone should go ahead and do that right now. Go to ritaemmett.com. That's RITAEMMETT.com. Go there, scroll down, and then print out that one pager. That way you can have the Sting steps on your wall, and that way you can always go back to that if you feel like you need it, if you feel like you need to up your game. And it's great even to hear, Rita, that none of us are immune, right? We all sometimes have those sort of down days or weeks, and we realize, oh yeah, it's because I was missing the I in Sting, it was, or I was
Yeah.
missing the N in Sting, it was a Stig, right? So sometimes even like the best of us sort of can find ourselves with the procrastination creeping back in, or some kind of the fear, or whatever, whatever our brain keeps cooking up to get in our own way. And then just by going back to that STING, going through the steps again, sounds like it helps just kind of to get that as an automatic habit, or to regain the habit if we lost it. So like you said, it works, for 85% of situations. People who say nothing else has worked, or they think they have ADD, or they think they're unfixable, the Sting method works. So everyone needs to go right now to ritaemmett.com, scroll down, get that Sting, that Sting one sheet. That way you know how to apply those steps. And so, are there any other web pages people should check out after listening to our talk today, or any books of yours, or anything like that they should grab?
Well, on the same home page, they could sign up for my tip sheet. It is absolutely free, comes out once a month by email, and it focuses on procrastination, clutter, or stress. And then also in the tip sheet, I announce I frequently offer free classes by telephone. They're called teleclasses, very clever. And I just did one yesterday, and all it was on is the dread we feel when we're procrastinating, how that dread hangs over our head like a black cloud and it sucks the energy out of the marrow of our bones. Um, so it's the I think we're going to have one coming up on paper clutter that your people might be interested in too. I think it's coming up in a month or two, so they could go there, and of course they could buy or at Amazon or any bookstore the Procrastinator's Handbook by me, or the Clutter Busting Handbook, or Manage Your Time to Reduce Your Stress. I also uh, if any of your people are writers, every once in a while I think we get a little crazy and we have to go off in a different direction. I also just wrote a kid's picture book based on Einstein's line that said, everyone is a genius, but if a fish is judged by its ability to climb a tree, it'll live its whole life feeling stupid. So it's a book about Farkle Shark and Sparkle Shark, and Farkle feels stupid because he can't climb a tree. So anyway, that's what's. Oh, they could just go to Rita Emmett on Amazon and see what's there. That's easier.
Super great. So all kinds of options for whatever it is that sort of whets your appetite. Search Rita Emmett on Amazon, or go to ritaemmett.com to get that tip sheet, register for teleclasses. That way you can focus on what you need to focus on. And I definitely think that just the action of staying up to date with things that could go wrong with procrastination, or just reading any kind of mindset, self-help, anything like that. There's no downside to it. It definitely helps to sort of stay on top of whatever obstacles come and creep in our way as entrepreneurs, as writers, and it always helps to get that different perspective, or at the very least just identify the roadblocks that are coming our way. So always good to stay on top of our own procrastination. So ritaemmett.com, and then Rita Emmett on Amazon. And I want to thank you so much, Rita, for coming by, sharing the Sting list, these Sting tips with us, and getting us out of our own way, getting us past procrastination. So I appreciate your advice. I appreciate you, and thanks for stopping by.
It's my pleasure. I enjoyed being with you, Robert.
Have you had a chance to rate and review the show yet? If not, go right now to robertplank.com/iTunes, click the View in iTunes button, and click the Ratings tab. We would really appreciate a 5-star rating, or whatever you think is fair, plus a quick one sentence review to tell us how we're doing. Thank you very much, and have a wonderful day.